Tell us, gentlemen, how you got on board, and obviously this was like the vision of Arnold Pinnock's, because he's like a history buff, and he was uh, intrigued by the sleeping porter journey back in the 1920s. So how did you guys get on board with that, and how were you selected? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, first it's Arnold Pinnock and Bruce Ramsey are the instigators of this whole journey and creative uh, what you've actually seen what we've created, but it's like the story of their intrigue into the story about the Porters and their contribution to this country and being actors and seeing the lack thereof, stories that represent our diaspora, like Bruce is also from Montreal and making these discoveries. So that was a bit of that was a spark, right? Like and that happened like many years ago. So at that inception, I recall they reached out to me to tell me about the project that they had in their mind, and at the time it's like it was very early and they had like a one page, and flashing forward it's like they reached out and built a long invested relationship with Sienna Films, Jennifer Kawaja and Julia Sereni, and had taken this project through periods of development, right? It takes getting broadcasters involved, and we're talking the inception of this like being 10 years ago, but really starting to move like in the last 5 years, right? And what we've seen also is the shift now of where are our stories, and the climate of the industry actually opening up to being more receptive to understanding, or I would just say catching up to the value of these stories, and that they've been missing from the canon of our television and films. And so it's taken a while for all this stuff to kind of come together. But came on and spoke with Jennifer and Julie about coming on this project as to direct, and that conversation began back in 2017. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. It's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah.
And but yeah, and yeah.
Yeah. And then my involvement really came probably around that time, Charles. I think it was around the first time I heard about it. I should say I wasn't involved, but it was around that year, 2017, maybe.
We were both in LA at the same time.
Yeah, so Charles and I were both in LA at the time, and I was out there pitching my last show, Utopia Falls, and I had just come off this really good meeting with Hulu, who eventually actually made that show. And then Charles was like, "Hey man, I'm in town. Like, let's get up." So we went out and grabbed a drink and hung out, and then he just he told me about this amazing project, and he's like, "Yeah, my friend Arnold and his writing partner Bruce, they kind of want to do a series about train porters." And I was like, "Oh wow, okay." Like, I knew a little bit about the train porters, but not to the extent of how they really affected policy in this country, and I would say even like through the sort of organization of the train porters for this union really kind of sparked there was like the seed of the civil rights movement in there, right? Just this idea of collectively coming together and using that collective power to move, create movements. So yeah, I mean, I was incredibly intrigued at that time, and I was like, wow, that sounds amazing. And then it was kind of like, well, let's see what happens with it. Again, I was going off to make a futuristic hip hop show, but interestingly enough, the two things are connected in my spirit, because Utopia Falls is actually a show for young people about the erasure of culture. You know,
Mhm.
in that show, it was that the government erased the idea of hip hop and protest culture and all of these things. They erased that. So these young people growing up without it. And then here is you know, an element of my own history that I didn't know nearly anything about. You know,
Right.
so in a very similar way, I was just very intrigued to know more. I wanted to know more, and then fast forward to, you know, I guess it was really last year, early last year. Was it, Charles? Jeez, man, I don't even.
Mhm.
Was it or
Well,
was it 2019?
it's so funny. It was coming off the heels of 2019,
Yeah.
and like actually like, you know, just like it was like, so because Utopia dropped like,
We dropped it in 2020. So we
yeah,
dropped it in 2020, but like early in the year.
yes,
Yes, early in the year. And then it was like soon after that,
after that,
yeah,
yeah.
that you came and you were like, hey man, remember that project about the train port? And I was like, yeah. And you're like, would you be interested if we got you some stuff to take a look at? And then yeah, and then Jennifer and Julia reached out. They sent me the stuff, and yeah, and then I officially kind of came on board at that point. Yeah.
Nice, nice. What was it? So what was it like to recreate this period piece back in the day, and working with your production designers, of course? And you know, it was set in Montreal, but you guys actually filmed it in Winnipeg. So tell us a little bit about that, and then what did you find compelling about doing that, and like just shooting in Winnipeg, where there was a lot of similarities that of actual Montreal. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, the beauty, just, you know, more on a practical sensibility, like, you know, this production was going to be quite demanding in terms of what we had to make it, and then finding a place where we're going to get the maximum shooting capacity out of where we're going to be. You know, it's like it's tricky to get your head around. Okay, how do we reimagine these or recreate and present these places in a realistic way? And we have New York, and we have Chicago, we have Montreal, little, you know, Saint Antoine community, but we also have, you know, the Montreal, the city. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so how do we actually do that? And going through the flashing forward through the process of, you know, we came to Winnipeg, and Winnipeg has an amazing history attached to actually its architecture, where there were, you know, these American architects used it as a playground, and so there's nice similarities of preserved buildings that speak to still hold that time, that were all made like, you know, something like 1830, like 1820, like we have these places that have existed, and it's like this time capsule, and you can maximize. So that was an amazing choice, and it also helped our production, you know. Also during COVID and everything, it was challenging, but we had to bring people there, right?
Yeah.
And luckily across the country, this one place really had everything that we needed. And
Nice.
there's also a lineage and a history to the Port of Story that's connected to Winnipeg, where you know, historically the movement was actually really instigated out of Winnipeg as well. So it was nice to pay homage that way, to physically be there and tap into the community. But yeah, we worked with Artie can elaborate more, but we worked with an amazing design team. Our production designer, Rejean Labre, I believe that's correct pronunciation. And
Yeah, well, I hope it is, because if it's Labrie, and I was calling Labrie the whole time.
Labre. I think that Labre. He's you know, and he's originally from Quebec in Montreal, and like ended up building a life in Winnipeg. So he had the best of these worlds, and you know, already inside of him, and he knew Winnipeg like very, very intricately, and
Yeah.
So based on the images and I remember we were all blown away when he just came with this preliminary sort of, okay, these are the real existing places at the time, and this is what we actually have. And we were like, wow, you know, the way he actually, so he already got it pretty quickly, but then building the world and the details of it, and the detailed conversations and numerous conversations. I mean, it was quite a feat, but we had an amazing team. I mean,
it was an incredible team. You know, Rajon and his team were just, you know, they're very detailed focused. So he could, you know, he really could tell us, you know, if what he could do with a modern building to make it feel like it was, you know, in the past, and really utilize what Winnipeg was giving us. I think also like you know, we had this, there's a company based in Winnipeg, Prairie Dog, who they just have, you know, some of this old, you know, train, you know, old train sets essentially, you know. And it's an incredible thing to, and they also had their own, a couple of stations that they actually operate out of. So it really allowed us to tell, you know, those story elements very practically. We actually got to shoot, you know, real trains and really kind of, you get the real sense of how epic these machines were, that moved people, ideas and business across the whole continent. And you know, it really, you know, the importance of trains at that time can't be overstated. It's you know, they really were, you know, what I'd call like a physical internet. You know, it was this entity that wasn't just travel. Travel is one thing, absolutely, but it was about you know, having ideas travel, having knowledge travel, right? And so it really was this huge network that these porters were able to, you know, exploit, learn, all of these things, and transport, gather ideas from different places, transport them back to their own neighborhoods, spread ideas, you know. And so there's, you know, there's various examples of that in the journeys of Zeke, as he tries to, you know, he goes to New York to meet with Randolph and, you know, take knowledge that he learns and brings it back, as well as Junior, you know, spreading his, you know, his hopeful enterprise, you know, or getting into shenanigans across the border. So it really is a transport machine, but it's a place of gathering and sharing knowledge in a way that the internet does for us today. So it was a beautiful thing to be able to actually be on those incredibly intricate machines and these feats of engineering, to see, you know, we marvel at the fact that, you know, it's like sometimes you can forget, especially at the time that a lot of these engines were built. They were built by hand, you know. Like, you know, it's you know, they were assembled by hand, you know. This is you know, before the heavy industrial revolution in that way. So it's very it's humbling to be around that kind of I guess human ingenuity and yeah. So anyways, but great stuff in Winnipeg.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of I felt there's a lot of tension in this in the series, and there's a lot of layers, of course, in the Porter. There's a lot of examples of man versus himself, man versus woman, man versus his own race, man versus other race, even man versus like his own environment, so to speak. But I mean, that struggle or that tension really reflects on how, you know, the Black community or back in the day, how they lived, and that shows a lot of their pride as well. Can you comment on that?
Mm. Mm.
I think we all grew up. It's like, I think this word pride also comes into, for me, it's synonymous with dignity. And I think that that is something where, you know, as a culture, dignity has often been the attempt to strip it away from us, you know, is a tactic to keep us in a certain sort of status quo, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I think there was I think our community is pride, it has pride to it, and I think that we've even sometimes had to puff up our chests a little bit more, you know, to be noticed, you know, and to stake that ground, you know. And I think that from the porters to the women in the community, it's like they take pride in what they believe they have to offer in society, and when that is constantly ignored or littled, and that just comes down to also the basic survival modes that we have to go into. You know, what are the pride of understanding that, you know, if you don't have that, you know, your life is taken away from you, you know. So I think there's a strong through line with that through, and pride also gets in the way of your choices, right? Like, you know, as you compensate or respond or react to things, your environment, you know, so you are constantly reacting against the environment in its natural form. You're responding to the men and the women and those relationships you have, and, you know, what you're doing to live. So this is more the cerebral philosophical response, but I feel like it's in our DNA. Like, we have warrior spirits.
Right.
There's a pride in that. And I think that that's in the DNA, I think, of the men and the women, and the conflict that arises out of that, you know.
Yeah, it's almost like, you know, it's quite like Charles is saying, you know, it's when a society is not designed for you, in fact, it is designed to oppress you, as that society was and still is in some cases, but especially back then, that was a society that was designed to oppress, you know, any culture except for white culture, women, you know, anybody who does not fit, quote unquote, what they considered the norm. It is designed to strip you of everything, you know, that you have, and all you have in many cases is your pride. It's the only thing that you can hold on to. And so the beauty of this, I think, this story, as you've pointed out, is that all of our characters walk with that pride, and that pride bumps up against many things, you know, and so throughout that, it pits them against each other. Two people have two sets of their own pride that are forcing them into a conflict, you know, but it guides them. So it's a beautifully complex story that really shows what happens when a society tries to take everything away from you. You only have the thing you can move with, which is your self-pride, and then how you manage that. And it's, you know, I think it's wonderfully written and, you know, nuanced. You know, Emery and Marsha did a beautiful job of giving us characters that were not perfect human beings. They didn't always make the right choices, but they were out there trying as
Yeah,
best
absolutely.
as they
Absolutely.
could to fulfill what they felt is needed. And you see all the complexity of that. So it's a beautiful thing. And then on the flip side, you know, in coming together to try to create this, you know, we had to set aside our pride in a lot of cases, to come together, to work together. You know, and that's one of the things that Charles and I talked about a lot at the very beginning. Just, you know, trying to be the best teammates for each other, and trying to be the best sounding board, and trying to be, you know, understanding that nothing is higher than what we're creating here.
Mhm.
What we're doing together is the most important thing. The creation of and the shepherding of this baby out into the world is the most important thing. And our egos have to step aside, and our you know, our pride in certain cases has to step aside in order to really give voice to some of our ancestors' stories, and hopefully to inspire people in the future. So we spoke a lot about that, and it, you know, it helps that Charles and I are, you know, we're really good friends, and
Nice.
have been for a long time, and have a lot of respect for each other. But even amongst the team, you know, the rest of the team, you know, we all had to come together and you know, put the porter first.
Mhm.
And so it was, you know, metaphorically, as a project, it was a beautiful thing, because we felt like we were coming together, like Zeke is trying to pull this union together for something better.
Right.
And we kind of felt that same way with this project.
Right. Was there because all the characters are just compelling, they're all intriguing. Was there a character that was difficult to fulfill in terms of like getting an actor or getting an actress to fulfill that role, if there was any challenge to that?
I think they're all challenging. I mean, you know, it's like every character, all of the main characters, very complex. I think for me, maybe, uh, I think maybe Queenie.
Yeah.
It was a like, you know, we had to get the right Queenie. You know,
Yeah.
you know, you needed you know, a woman who is a boss,
Yeah.
and like, you know, she commands respect, because there's a lot in the canon of gangsters, you know, film and TV gangsters. There's a lot of male, you know, bosses that are, you know, that do their thing, but we needed somebody who had an incredibly strong presence,
Mhm.
to challenge our, you know, our junior, but then also somebody who's, you know, who's complex and
Mm.
has nuance as well. So finding the right Queenie, finding the right tone for that character, I think was one of the things um, that was challenging for sure. I don't know. What do you think, Charles? Anybody for you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but I but also agree with you saying that it was challenging for every character,
Yeah.
because also just, you know, well, I think some of us, we knew this, but it would just confirmed it, and maybe confirmed it even further to the amount of talent that exists in this
Mhm.
country. So
Yeah.
you know, I think it was a challenge in the process as well, like, you know, knowing that there were like three amazing actors, you know, at times, and then during the process some actors aren't available anymore or whatever, and it's
Yeah.
just, you know, and it was all during this time where I think Black actors were getting the most attention we've ever seen on the planet. So it was like all these sort of things were bubbling at the same time as making this project. But I think that we assembled, you know, we just really tried, and by truly the nature of casting, just assemble the best group of individuals that embodied these characters, as well as very talented actors as well, you know. So yeah, Queenie was tough. I felt like, you know, instinctually, like this woman was, because it was quite a long process, man. Like, you know, we saw people 7 months, you know, ago, and then didn't see them again until, you know, a while, you know, right? Like, so there was these gaps, and also just, you know, for actors out there, understanding that there is a process in here that has nothing to do with the actors.
Yeah.
You know, that actors often aren't privy to, and I think it's to protect them, and they don't need to know. But it's like, it was a grueling process casting. We had so many characters.
Yeah.
And that was also, I mean, we had to cut characters, like, you know, that actually we put out casting, you know, people read for. Like, we had to, you know, it's a big project. And but through that process, understanding what, you know, first season we can sink into, and also know that as the story continues into second and third and fourth seasons, that there's more actors and more characters that can be introduced, right? Doesn't all have to be packed into the first season.
Nice.
You
know? So I'm gonna combine a couple of questions together, I'm gonna for a couple of questions together, because we're kind of running out of time. But the series reminded me a lot of Harlem Nights, because of a lot of the music and a lot of the what people were wearing back in the day, and the sort of like the club atmosphere. And it's funny though, because on TikTok the other day, I was watching Jay Leno interview Eddie Murphy, and them talking about, you know, well, there's no white leading characters in Harlem Nights, and then Eddie Murphy was like, well, it wasn't supposed to be like that, and then he was sitting there, the critics were criticizing Eddie Murphy for not having any white led
Versus racism,
in Harlem Nights. So I guess I'm gonna attach that to my last question in this interview, is like, so what do you want the audience to take out of the Porter? What do you want them to take home with them? And especially the fact that this is not a white-led feature, but actually a black-led feature in the Porter.
Well, like, audiences are multicultural. Like, you know what I mean? Like I think it's hilarious. You know, when you know, you hear, and to be fair, like, I think, you know, obviously this Harlem Nights conversation happened in the good old, you know, 80s, which was, you know, even a few years ago, it had a slightly different skew. But I just think it's, you know, it's like, you know, we, you know, have been going to see Star Wars and Batman and you know, The Godfather, and like, we fell in love on Titanic, and we laughed at American Pie. Like, we've been going to see white movies for our whole lives. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, and we connect with them, and we cry, and we get scared, and we, you know, so we connect with those films. And I just find it hilarious to this kind of implication that, like, white audiences can't connect with a black face. Like, they go, oh, they just won't understand it. I mean, I think that's a ludicrous thing that has kind of been perpetuated for a long time, and it's completely false. We're human beings. we experience, we're storytellers. Like that's one of the defining factors of being human. You know, it's built into our DNA. That's how we learn and experience things. So and it's part of every single culture. So it's kind of insane to this implication that people can't connect to a story that doesn't feature somebody who looks like them, because we've been doing it for years, our whole, you know,
right.
and so
that we can't
if,
tell, or that we're not capable of telling those stories too. We can only tell like these stories, right? Like, but folks can tell our stories and all the stories, right? Like so it's exactly what RT is saying. It's just like this thing about audience, and it's been a constant sort of conflict and point of contention for me is that in these conversations of greenlighting projects or seeing things made, television series or whatever, this question about audience and who that is, and I for a number of years now I've been pushing back on that in every meeting whenever that conversation comes back, because audience has evolved. And we are, you know, talking, you can't toot around, you know, the validity of saying, as far as like, you know, I don't think people in you know, West Coast Canada are going to watch the show because there are Black people in it. Like we have people there. We actually just shot there, you know, like, you know, and people have been there. Or the fact of like, oh, well, the Americans have to validate a Black story here before it can get made. No, there's a valid audience right here generationally that has been deprived. And then there's a generation that is actually hungry for it. And so to assume that this medium that we all understand, it's like music, it's one of the powerful mediums on the planet, that we see what it can do, and still holding it in a certain place of that it's only welcome towards, you know, everything has to be geared to this kind of audience. Like that is a farce. It doesn't, it's nonsensical to me. So I think that we have made a show where the story that we're telling by nature calls for Black actors to be at the front end of the show and to be present throughout the entire series. The story that we're telling, it calls for that. Like there's no substitutions here. It's that specific. It's like if you're telling a story, you know, about you know, anyway, you get what I'm saying. It's
absolutely.
So this question of where, like, you know, we're celebrating that, but at the same time, but that's what our story is about. You know, we're not trying to like fit something in and make characters interchangeable to fit a thing. This is the story we're telling, and this is a space that we've been hungry for, and we deserve that space.
Absolutely.
And also, like, you know, look, I mean, you know, the sales companies that push this stuff out into international territories, the studios that greenlight things, the networks that greenlight things, when questions like that come back at us now, you know, now we have more, like, you know, I would say early in my career, I didn't have the language to speak about it. But the reality of it is that it's on them and us, and we will do the work too, but it's also on them. This idea that they can't greenlight a show because they don't believe there's an audience, it's false. They have to work harder. They have to reach those audiences because the audiences are there and they want stuff and they want to see themselves. But if you don't know how to reach them, and if you don't communicate with those audiences, then you lose them and you don't have them. But now we have platforms. These streaming platforms show the data is incredible. And they show that people of all different cultures are watching and want material and will watch. Like, I don't even have to say Squid Game and you know what it is. Like, you know, and and I'm not Korean, but I watched the hell out of that show.
Yeah.
Just like everybody else in the world that made it the biggest show ever in that streamer's history. So, you know, that just goes to show you that the audiences are there. You just have to work smarter. I would even say not even harder. You just have to work smarter and engage those communities, because those communities will fill blind spots for you. They'll tell you how to reach them if you know how to communicate with them. So it's just lazy. It's lazy when people say those kinds of things.
It's been the same repetitious throwaway line for centuries in this industry. Right in this country. And it's like, you know, so, and there are people out there who know how to reach those audiences, hence by the stories that we are trying to tell. And so it's like you can reach them and you don't know how, find the folks, we're right here to help you to reach them, you know. It's like and this idea that basically if I don't know it, it can't be good or popular or of intrigue. It's like I come from the school of like the things I want to know about the things I don't know. I don't want to assume that because I don't know about this amazing artist or this amazing act or this amazing story that it's not valid or not a credible story because I've never heard of it before. It's yeah.
I feel like you had your second part of your question, so I'll just throw something at it. I mean, in terms of what we hope this series does, for me, I hope that it provides, like a lot of the things that I revere when I watch, I hope it provides inspiration. I hope that it inspires its audience, both Black and white and everybody else, to look for more stories within themselves that they can tell, know that it's possible, know that it can happen, and continue the spirit of that kind of creation, the ones that want to create. And then for the other ones, I hope that it inspires them to look into their past and find those hidden stories, you know, and because you know, it's like when Charles first came and talked to me about the project, I had scantily heard about the Porters, and that's because it wasn't taught in my history classes in school. You know, so you know, our stories are you know, as Arnold Pinnock says, our stories are woven into the fabric of this flag of this country, and many other different cultures are as well. So I just hope that it inspires people to go back and take a look and really find, you know, how they really are a part of this country.
Yeah, I would just add just a little bit to that. That was very well said, RT. Agree with everything that you've just articulated, and I would say that it's for me it's an acknowledgement of our ancestors, and that these myths that are built around what this country has been and what it's been built upon, and taking these stories out of this sort of fable-like perspective and giving it a reality check, you know, that this is, we've been here, we have generations that have been here, and the fact that RT and I and this team has come together, and Anne-Marie Murray and Marsha Green and Arnold and Bruce and just the list goes on, is that, you know, this is homage to our ancestors that have allowed us to really, I feel like with this project, we kind of hacked the system. We kind of hacked like this network, you know, the way we had to make it, which is like what we do in a way, we got to hack it. And, but then our forefathers like, and mothers like basically hacked through the actual earth, and you know what I mean, for
Yeah.
us to get here. So
Yeah.
we'll continue to do that, and hopefully that's inspiring another generation to keep hacking through, you know.
Yeah.